Welcome to another episode of Terrific Tips for Business. Why terrific? Because you can't spell terrific without Terry, and I'm your host. So welcome. I'm so glad to have you today. And oh man, I cannot wait to introduce you to this guest that we have on the show. He's epic. He's the definition of epic. And I'll tell you why. So I met David Harter actually through a chain of events that were very serendipitous. Okay. So earlier in January of 2020, I got pulled into an event in New Jersey. And so I went up to New Jersey. I met some really, truly amazing people while I was there. One of which invited me onto a networking conversation that after that conversation took place, one of their guests actually knows David and said, Terry, you need to talk to David. I think you guys would be amazing and he would be awesome on your podcast. And I said, well, introduce me then, Tiffany. I look forward to this. And Tiffany then that day introduced me to David. And we've been talking now, a couple of months now?
A couple months. Terry.
Yeah. And David Harter is absolutely incredible. I cannot wait to share him with you and let you see why I think he's just the most amazing thing since sliced bread. Not kidding. David Harter is a financial planner with Epic Insurance Services. I mean, you've got to have a name like Epic. Come on. Of course, he's unreal. He's out of this world. So let me tell you about David. David graduated Peace University with a BA in communications. For those of you that don't know what BA is, it's Bachelor's of Administration, if I believe that's correct.
Yep, that's right, Terry.
Awesome. He spent 4 years with Solomon Smith Barney.
Yep.
Okay. So 2 years he was doing consulting and financial advisors on retirement planning. And the other 2 years he worked as an investment advisor. So he's got a lot of advisory kind of experience going on here. Not only that, he worked with UBS Financial Services for 4 years. And I'm going to have him share with us what UBS is when we get into our conversation. He managed over $40 million in investment assets. Holy smokes, guys. This guy knows how to deal with money, okay? Now you know why he's on the show. He knows how to deal with money. And we've only had, one other financial person on the show thus far. So I'm excited to have somebody who can talk some real financial sense with us. He was also a national training officer for new advisors. So not only does he know the financial world, he knows how to teach other people how to know the financial world. Hello. He's the director of training for MetLife in New Jersey for 2 years. And he's been in leadership and financial planning since 1999. For those of you who aren't very good with math, that's 21 years. That's a good long time to be involved in the financial space. He joined Epic Insurance Services. Is that 5 years ago, David?
3 years ago.
3 years ago as a financial planner. And he is on the YouTube channel, Epic Financial Strategies. He's happily married to his wife, Melissa. They have 3 beautiful children, Gabriel, Charlotte, and Tyson. They live in Mopac?
Mayapack.
New York. I don't know how to pronounce that. And he's very, very active with the Alzheimer's Foundation. And now you guys know, I don't like bringing people on the show that don't have a strong why, that are not really tied into their community. I want to have people who are really making a difference in the world. And I believe David is one of those people. So please join me in welcoming Mr. David Harter to the show. Thanks for being here today.
Hey gosh, Terry, thank you so very much. It's such an honor and a privilege. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So tell me, what is this? What is UBS Financial? What is that?
Yeah. So years ago, it was known as Payne Weber, and Payne Weber was bought by a company by the name of Union Bank of Switzerland. And they ultimately just became UBS. That's actually just what it stands for, but it's one of the largest investment banks in the world. And I spent 3 years consulting clients on investment advisory strategy there. And I spent my last year with UBS actually teaching new advisors. I was in their national training office in Weehawken, Connecticut. and I was a national training officer for developing advisors to go into the field for us. So a lot of investment banking experience.
Absolutely. Okay, so Switzerland, we've all heard of the Swiss watches and the Swiss banks. And so you really have some like world experience when it comes to the world of finance, not just United States finance.
Correct. Yep.
Give us the skivvy. What is happening right now?
Well, the market was on an uninterrupted bull run, basically, Terry, for the last 12 years, with the exception of a couple of hiccups. And, there was a lot of things that indicated that we could see turbulence coming into the new year. I don't think that anybody saw COVID-19 happening, though.
That would have been a little hard to predict, I
That
think.
would have been a little bit hard to predict. But, the markets like catalysts every now and then. And, I think that the impact of what happened overseas with COVID-19 really started to introduce volatility into the US market even before it really got here. And the first wave of COVID-19, markets periodically like to, identify spots where they can take profits. And we're in a different market today than we have been historically, where you're not, we're dealing with exchanges where people are open outcry, sell this, buy that. It's really mostly run algorithmically. It's run by computers and it's run by big banks that you press a button and millions of shares get traded immediately. And so when you see profit take happen like that, you see trickle down effect take place. And so as COVID really started to find its way into the United States, and the first wave of the CARES Act also, Terry, was there was a lot there was not a lot of education that was provided to the general population, to business owners, about what was available to them, what wasn't available to them, and just really very, very little and low guidance that was in the general marketplace. And so when there's skepticism and when there's fear, one of the two emotions that push markets is fear. It's either fear or greed, one of the two. And so when that fear factor really started to move into the marketplace, you saw a lot of panic sale and you saw a lot of people abandon philosophy. And as that has started to subside, you've seen a couple of the catalysts and a couple of the beneficiaries in the market, the Amazons of the world, and some of the e-commerce based companies really kind of keep the market afloat, if you will. And so while we've seen substantial recovery in the second half of the year, I'm not a predictor, and I don't want to fashion myself as an analyst, but I know with the clients that we consult, we continue to keep them in line with what we originally set out as our financial goals and accomplishments when we first met. Keep your eye on the ball. There was a record outflow from the market with individual investors I think it was from from the end of April through the end of June, and that was one of the highest levels of recovery in the market, and so people missed that quite a bit. So it's always a great time, and this has been a fascinating time to keep people in line and in tune with not only their tolerance to risk, but is their investment portfolio holistically, not just stocks, but holistically in line with what we're trying to get accomplished. So it's been a really, really interesting time, and it's been one where my relationships with my personal clients and our clients at Epic has really deepened as a result of it, Terry.
Absolutely. And I guess this is why financial advisors all over the country always say diversify your portfolio, right? The more diverse the portfolio is, the more likely you are to weather these economic storms, so to speak, that are going to come up. And you're right. I had a friend here who's in the financial world. They actually deal a lot with taxes and people's tax issues. And they had been predicting as early as like May of last year that there was going to be an economic situation. There was going to be a bubble that was going to pop in 2020. They couldn't pinpoint what it was, but they knew that there was going to be something. And I've reached out to them since then and said, "Damn, you're good. Like you knew that was going to happen." So talk to us a little bit about as people who are not in the world of finance, what are some things that we maybe could be asking of our financial advisors, of our insurance brokers, that can make us more aware of what maybe some of those leading indicators might be, so that we can start to also see where that recovery is going to come and take effect?
Sure, great question. And it's all driven about, is your financial planner and is your relationship driven by product or by process, right? And so for us, we were proactively looking to try to take risk off the table towards the fourth quarter of last year going into it. Again, not necessarily knowing that COVID was going to be a catalyst, but when you just think rationally for a moment, if you've had a period, if you look at the history of markets, bear markets follow bull markets, right? And so when you looked at valuations and when you looked at history, it was relatively clear that there was going to be a catalyst coming down the pipeline that was going to create some market volatility. But that's all well and good. When it gets to the individual client household for a second, you have to look at the fact that most American households don't have predictable income distribution streams during retirement, right? They might be focusing on Social Security. Social Security is not going to be enough to support a household, unfortunately, in the world that we live in today. And the average 401k balance in the United States, Terry, right now, today, is $63,000. That's not enough money, number one. And number two is, I know that blows a lot of people.
I'm totally shocked by that. That's like not even for most people. The average income is what, $36,000 a year. So for most people, that $67,000 will last them 2 years. Okay.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. This, and when you're taking money out of your retirement assets, it's a lot. The math is a heck of a lot different than when you're putting the money into it, right? When you're putting into it, if the market moves up or down, periodically you capitalize on that stuff, right? Sometimes you buy things cheap, but when you're spending and you're no longer contributing, the math works against you. An easy example of that is if I have $100 and I lose 50%, what do I have? I have $50, right? But to get back up to $100, I need 100% return. Well, what that's saying is Mr. and Mrs. Smith, what I need you to do is I need you to take on substantially more risk. How do you feel about that? And that's not good enough in our eyes, And if I'm taking money out while I have that downturn, that really spells problems. And most, in my opinion, United States households are not prepared for longevity of retirement, for the income requirements that they're going to have, as well as new inflation that's going to come into their household. I just laid my father to rest about a month ago, and he was suffering from Alzheimer's disease for 3 years. And that's actually not that long in comparison to how long that certain people are in extended care facilities. Well, they're not cheap, right? And those new costs come in during retirement. So if you haven't had a conversation with your financial planner about, hey, what does my retirement income distribution look like? And what are going to be my fixed and my guaranteed income sources? Because I just can't rely on the markets always going up. What happens if I'm spending and they go down? I'm in trouble. So for us, we're very, very, very proactive in our analysis with our clients. It's very comprehensive. We look at everything. We go under the hood and see, okay, what's working optimally and what's not, and how can we get money back onto your balance sheet? Because the more money that we create for you, the more predictable your income is going to be when you retire.
And that's so important too. I think one of the conversations that we had early on into me getting to know you, we were talking about pre-tax, post-tax contributions. And let's talk a little bit about that, because most of our listening audience is like 35 to 55 years old. So we're pre-retirement age right now. We're still able to do those contributions. What is the difference between pre-tax and post-tax, and how does that affect us on the other side?
That's an amazing question. And, in my opinion, there's a number of financial myths that exist. And one of those, and one of those is, first and foremost, the first job that you get, what do you have to do? You have to maximize your 401k contribution. And I don't want to defer people from saving money, right? That's the last thing that I want to do. But we have to look at the treatment of how those monies are taxed, right? So there's three types of vehicles, right? There's taxable vehicles, There's tax-free vehicles, and then there's tax-deferred vehicles. And most people are saving in tax-deferred vehicles, and a 401k is an excellent example of that. When 401k was created, it was created as a way where where individuals could, on a tax-deferred basis, save money into an account and invest that money for their future retirement income. While that money is in the account, it is growing on a tax deferred basis. However, when I say deferred, what that means is that the IRS has a lien on your money, right? And so they will allow you to contribute up to specific thresholds into those accounts without recognizing on your income tax return for the calendar year. In fact, actually deducting your income for that calendar year. But later on, when you're distributing money out of those accounts, it is fully taxable as ordinary income.
And here's a question that, like, our taxes are increasing every year. So if I'm doing tax deferred now, in 10, 20, 30 years, when I go to withdraw that money, and the income tax bracket is higher now, am I not paying more on that money than I would have if I put it in now?
Great question. You are. And, we talk about, comprehensive financial planning is about not only helping people grow their wealth, but it's also analyzing potential risks, right? And so some of the risks that we think of are, what happens if I die, right? Well, that's what life insurance is for. What happens if I get sick or hurt? That's what disability and health insurance are for. And we focus in on those things immediately day one. But the other thing that we have to think about is, what are your future risks, right? And your future risks are future liabilities that you're not taking into consideration. In today's world, and for years, the government has been looking for methods where they could drive taxes down, right? But if you look at the history of taxes in the U.S., there have been times that are not all unlike the times that we're in now, where corporate tax brackets and individual tax brackets were substantially higher. And if you look at the state of our economy, I think that there's a very compelling argument that income tax brackets, both corporate as well as individual, could be much higher in the future because of future liabilities that the country has. Well, if that's the case, and the average marginal income tax bracket for the average American household is 50 or 60%, Terry, can you imagine if you had $1 million in a 401k? You think you have a lot of money, but what are you losing? You're losing buying power every day when you take money out, losing 50, 60 cents on the dollar. That's a major potential liability. And so proactively, we at Epic are looking at that as a potential outcome, and how can we mitigate that outcome in the future? Because the tax bomb, in my humble opinion, is coming, and people are not going to be prepared for it. And when it hits, it's going to hit hard.
Yeah, and that's a very real concern. 50 or 60% tax bracket is scary. Like, you think 22% is high. Like, I'm pretty much like 22%, 25% is ridiculous. Yeah. Stop it. This is insanity. And now 50 or 60%. So what recourse do we have? Like, what's our option? How do we protect against that from having that major of an impact on our income?
The first question is, how are you saving, right? Because the savings rate in the U.S. has been really low for a long time, even taking into consideration contributing to the 401k at work or the retirement plan at work. And I think the reason for that, Terry, is because there's a big lack of guidance for American families and for businesses, by the way, too, on, what's the appropriate method of saving. We always talk about paying yourself first, and paying yourself first does not mean don't pay your taxes. I want to be really clear about that. I know. And, it doesn't mean, and it doesn't mean don't pay liabilities. But what you have to remember is that nobody's going to retire for you, and financial institutions are not going to just give you a break for your cash flow when you're retired if you have liabilities to them. So what we do is take a really deep dive look at how you're saving. And if you're not saving, 10, 20% of your gross income per year, what's getting in the way of that? Right? It doesn't mean we snap our fingers and you immediately start doing that. Like, hey, I'm just going to stop paying my bills. I'm going to pay myself first. That doesn't happen, but through diligent process, we can look at what's happening underneath the hood, right? We can see where you're sending your money When the income comes in the front door, it goes somewhere, right? Does it go into your pocket, or is it going to a financial institution, whether it's the IRS, student loans, credit card companies, auto insurance companies, homeowners insurance? Where's that money going? And number two, do you intend it to go there? Right? A lot of people do things like, we call it an economic junk drawer, right? Everybody's got one in their household. Everybody's got a junk drawer, right? And we call it an economic junk drawer. The economic junk drawer is I made a decision, I bought a financial instrument, and I put it in my junk drawer, and I didn't think about it again. And sometimes that creates major lost opportunity cost, right? Where I'm just put something set and forget, and I keep paying it because it's easy, but I may be spending way more than I need to, right? It could be a deductible on an auto insurance policy. It could be I'm putting money into a pre-tax or a tax deferred vehicle when I would be over time better suited putting it in a taxable vehicle or a tax-free vehicle for the future. But I've never taken that into consideration because I've never been guided about that, because I've never been asked the question, hey, why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you sending your money here? Who coached you into this? And what was the rationale? Maybe it's perfect, right? But maybe it's not. Maybe it's not going to benefit you down the line. Have you taken these things into consideration? So a comprehensive cash flow analysis is really the first thing that we do with every business and every client that we take on, because we have to understand what's happening under the hood, and is it going to suit you in the future? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And I want to touch on this because you started to, and then I derailed us with a question. So you talked about the tax deferred. Yep. So what is the tax free? Because hello, I would like to be in tax free, please. How do we get the tax free? And the tax now, like you pay the tax now. So sure. Maybe you can explain the difference between those, and that might help us a little bit.
100%. So, and everything is circumstantial, right? Every household has a different set of circumstances. They have different costs. They also have different aspirations and goals, right? So one client household may say, I just want to retire in the home that I'm in and I want to maintain, and that's all. And then others may say, look, I want to travel the world. I want multiple properties. I want, to build out real estate, and I want the most effective way to do that. But when you're thinking about the tax deferred relative to the tax free, some examples of tax-free vehicles are like Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, right? Does your employer have a Roth feature to the 401k? Does that make sense based upon your income? Do you need tax deductions? Maybe we can find harmony between the two. I find that people lack financial homeostasis, right? And that's the delicate balance between, do we feed some tax deferred accounts to keep your taxes low, thinking about now as well as what we think about in the future? But the Roth feature there, insurance policies. People don't think about life insurance when they think about income. They don't think about life insurance when they think about assets. But certain types of life insurance vehicles accumulate wealth inside of them, accumulate equity, accumulate cash, which can be used for retirement income, for paying for college, for investing in other, real estate, for investing in businesses. And when done the right way, can be given to you on a income tax free basis according to current legislation. And so can we find a balance between the two, and does that make sense? The taxable vehicles are your brokerage accounts, right? Or your savings accounts. The ones where, if you own a stock that pays a dividend, then you have to recognize that dividend on your income tax return. Are you better suited having some money in there, maybe to create some losses, to create some tax write-offs or some tax, we call it tax harvesting periodically. So finding that delicate balance is something that we love doing, because it's really rolling up our sleeves, going deep, and seeing how can we take a good situation and make it great. How can we take a great situation and make it optimal? Our best clients have come, and all of our clients come because we consistently pursue optimizing something that's already good that's happening.
That's beautiful. I appreciate the explanation of the difference. And I've heard that there are life insurance policies that I think they're called, are they the whole life policies that include an investment component to it?
Whole life policy doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily investment related per se, as much as it's more, you have some guarantees in there, and then it's, maybe some profits from the company itself. But then in addition to that, there are other types of policies that do have some market exposure there too. Depending on your risk appetite, they can fit as well. The fun is finding out what you want, right? And why you want it. We have clients that buy real estate, and for that, what they're looking for consistently is leverage to be able to do it, right? Well, using insurance strategies actually is an amazing way to create that. Whole life works actually really well in that space, as an example. But then you have others that want maximum growth, and so there's other insurance policies that create, if you're willing to take a little more risk, some of that. We guide you based upon, hey, Terry, this is what you want, this is where you are, and this is where you want to go. And if we were you, this is what we would do, and here's why, right? And fit that square peg into the square hole. But insurance as an asset vehicle is amazing in that space.
So you really provide this yellow brick road of success leading up to and following that retirement. I really love the question that you posed of, what is my distribution, or what does my distribution look like? If I, for example, need my distribution to be X per month in retirement, how do I get there on this side of retirement so that that side of retirement is everything that I want it to be?
It's like climbing a mountain, Terry, right?
Yeah.
And I ask people all the time, I say, what's the point of climbing a mountain? They always say, well, to get to the top. No, it's to get to the top and get back down safely, right? And for that, you need, if you're climbing Mount Everest, you need different tools to get down than you needed to get to the top. And 85% of the people that pass away on Mount Everest have passed away on the way down. Retirement income is no different, right? You need different tools to maintain income during your retirement years than you needed to accumulate wealth, right? But the retirement income dilemma is a big problem. It's a big problem that we're actively trying to solve.
Yeah. And it's been a big problem for a long time, because especially like my generation, we've been told since we were in grade school that we weren't going to have Social Security.
Yeah.
So like we've been working all this time feeding into this Social Security machine that isn't even going to be there for us when it's time for us to retire, or for my brother or his kids to retire, for that matter.
Take that even further.
Yeah.
Social Security is the world's biggest pension, right? Well, in the 1950s and the 1960s, companies had pensions, right? Retirement planning wasn't even a thing. You worked for one company your whole life, or a couple of companies, and when you retired, you had a pension. As time has gone on, life expectancies have gotten longer, the workforce has gotten bigger, we've had a couple of changes in markets and interest rates, all this different type of stuff, and now most companies don't offer pensions. And so as a result, 401k was introduced to be the substitute to that, but that's not enough. People need predictable income. They need pension style income when they retire. How do you do it? We have the secret sauce to show you how to do that.
Yeah. Is there a tip that you might be able to give away to help those of us who, this is a foreign language, right? We don't live in the financial market space. So how do we even begin to identify what we might need? Because you mentioned a couple of times making the decision of what you need, or making the decision why you feel like you need it. Well, if we don't really know the financial markets, I don't know what I need. And I certainly don't know why I need it. I just know that I want my retirement to look like this. And I have no idea how to get there. So what are maybe some tips that we can start doing to help us educate ourselves on what we might need?
The first question I think you need to ask yourself is not so much, am I financially organized? Because that's important, but are my trusted advisors organized? I think that's really, really critical, because, for years and years and years, you went to your insurance agent for what? For insurance. You went to your investment advisor for investments. You went to your accountant for taxes. You went to your lawyer for legal documents, or whatever the case may be. Auto insurance, all of the above, right? And there's all of these trusted advisors that are pointing information one way. But the question I think that's most important is, hey, are they communicating with one another? because for me to have the highest level of success, that wheel needs to be turning harmoniously. And so is the advice that I'm getting from the people that are trusted in my world to give me that advice, is it coordinated with what's happening elsewhere? EPIC actually stands for Empower, Protect, Integrate, and Coordinate, right? And one of the big things that I've recognized over the years is that coordination of financial decision making has to come from the advisors all working on the same page. So if your CPA is giving you guidance, Terry, on your business, it's important for me as the financial planner to know what that advice is and why it's being given to you. And does my advice model coincide with what they're saying? If it butts heads, then that's what creates disruption and ultimately creates failure. So I work very, very diligently to get my clients to understand and to feel confident that all of the advisory that they're receiving is harmonious, right? It's all on the same page. That's number one. I think that's the first question you need to ask yourself. Then question number two is, okay, well, if I feel as though they are, is my financial balance sheet reflective of that same harmonious guidance? Am I organized? Am I budgeted? Do I have everything on one landing page where if I'm making decisions, I can see how one decision impacts all others? And if the answer to that is no, then that's step two, getting organized. Hey, just what do I have? From there, step three is, hey, let's test what we have to see if it's going to accomplish what it needs to accomplish. And then that's where transactions come in. That's where introducing new products and services and strategy comes into play. So the trifecta, if you will, is organizing my trusted advisors, number one, making sure that they're in harmony, organizing my financial livelihood, everything, to one landing page so I can see it, number two, and then having a quarterback or a coach or a team testing to make sure that it's going to do what it is supposed to do. And if it's not, how do we make tweaks?
That's some great advice, David. I appreciate that, because that certainly lends to some clarity on steps to take that's going to help you ensure your financial future. And I love that you use the analogy Mount Everest, because the other financial planner that we had on the conversation actually did climb Mount Everest. And so we talked about Mount Everest and what that looks like. And you're right. Most people fall on the way down. Yeah. And she said she fell flat on her butt on her way down, and she laughed out loud and said, is this not exactly what happens in retirement? You're so good. You've got your advisor, you're saving like you're supposed to. You're just boot. And then you get there, you're at the top, it's retirement day, life is good, you see the sun come up and it's a beautiful day, and you go to start walking back down, and the next thing you know, whoop.
Bam. I'll tell you, the best analogy about retirement that I ever heard was, and I believe in the case method, by the way, which is copy and steal everything, right? So, but the best analogy I ever heard was that retirement can be like driving into the desert in a brand new Cadillac Escalade on a full tank of gas, right? And having your three best friends in the car. When you first drive into it, it's a brand new truck, right? So you're happy, you got the music flowing, you have the air conditioning all the way up, everything that's happening in there is amazing. And you get about 4 or 5 hours into the journey, and all of a sudden you look down at the gas gauge, and the gas gauge is near empty, right? And then you see a sign outside, and the sign says that the next gas station is 300 miles away, right? Now that euphoria that was in the car turns into panic, right? It totally flips on its head. And then you got one person saying, hey, speed up, maybe you'll coast the way there. You have one person say, slow down, right? Because maybe, the slower they go, the less gas you use. And the third person says, go and average, speed, because that gets the best gas efficiency. And the reality is you're going to run out of gas, right?
You're still going to run out of gas.
You're still going to run out of gas. And it's 125 degrees outside. So what are you going to do? The challenge there was that you drove into the desert without having a roadmap of where the gas station is. That's the best analogy of retirement income distribution I have ever heard, and that I use with every client, is that we have to know where the gas stations are. We have to understand what could happen. When people get financial plans, that look at retirement income, a lot of times they're linear, right? They just show the best case or the average scenario. But do they test them for what bad could happen, right? Do they test them for a bad market? Do they test them for your roof, you needing a new roof, right? That's $15,000. Do they test it for needing extended health care? Do they test it for getting sick or hurt, or, having twins as opposed to just having one child, all of those different things? Your plan has to be living breathe. You have to test for what's worst, the worst case scenarios. Because if you know that you can overcome and you can hit your goals and what you want, it's not about retirement need, it's about retirement want, right? Every day in retirement is Saturday. And I want every day for my clients to look that way. And so for that, we have to test and make sure that the worst case scenarios are being looked at. And if we're overcoming them and we feel confident there, then we're doing our job,
That's exactly right. And we joke all the time because my husband's parents are both retired and every day is Saturday.
Yeah.
100% for them. And it's hilarious when you talk to them because you're like, so what have you been up to? This, modeling the house, going out fishing. Nothing, doing nothing.
Or the best is, I don't know.
Yeah, just stuff. I don't know. I've been home reading books. Yeah. But I always say I want to live now more like I am retired, because I saw some numbers the other day, and let me know if this is true. You would know. You work for what, 60 years of your life, just shy of that, about that, to save for retirement. And most people, the average age of death is somewhere between 78 and 80 years old. So you retire at what? 66 years old, you're retiring, you have 11 years.
I mean,
to live?
Yeah, and you worked all of those years to accumulate wealth, and it's no different in businesses too, Terry. I mean, people who own businesses, a lot of times what they don't think about is, one of my more valuable assets is this business that I have, and how am I going to exit out of this business, and what type of annuity could it create for me, and a lot of times I see people who own businesses don't even know what it's worth. Right. And don't even have a book value, let alone an exit strategy. And that can cause problems because, if I own a business and I'm the intellectual property there and I decide that I want to try to sell it, well, if I'm selling it, I might be working more years afterwards because I'm the intellectual property. If I'm buying your business, I want to know that the clients aren't running out the back door as a result of you leaving. So a major part of consultation for us with people who own businesses as well is, how does your business factor into your retirement plan? How does your business factor into your family legacy? Do your children realize that you intend on transitioning it to them, and is that what they want? Right? Or, or
because how many times is that not true? 100%. My husband actually worked for a guy when one of his first jobs was working in HVAC. Yep. And it's so far removed from what he does now, but that's another story for another day. And he was doing HVAC. He was learning how to fold the sheet metal for the ducts, the air duct systems that they buy made already. They're all prefabbed already. But this was back before prefab existed. And so he was fabricating these ducts. Well, the guy he worked for had a son, and Brian was his best friend. They were like buddies. His son did not work for him and did not have any interest whatsoever in working for him. So when it came time to retire, he looked at selling the business to his son's other best friend, Nate. And Nate was absolutely all for it. And then Nate decided, never mind, I'm going to go to the military instead. And he left. He went into the military. Well, Jordy's dad, George, ended up selling the place and just living off of the whatever he sold the place for, because who is he going to leave it to? He wasn't going to leave it to his son. So that's a very real thing. Like, some people can pass it down in their families. And we've seen that happen with businesses that he works with, businesses that I've worked with, is that it's a third, fourth generation owned. Beautiful when that can happen. But when it doesn't,
yeah. And, in today's world, a culprit of that is like CPAs. Because I mean, with CPAs, I mean, for years and years and years, their model was just one, specific way. They worked with individual households, and it was an April 15th type thing. And some CPAs are more proactive with their clients than others are. But in today's world, people have the tendency to want to be more penny wise and dollar foolish and do it themselves. That's where TurboTax came from. And that's where you're seeing CPA firms that are starting to flow more into the business, business consulting, right? And business tax. So, but for the traditional CPA practice that is still consulting individual households, if I'm going to buy that, when I know that the scope of that world is already shifted towards people doing it themselves or looking for lesser cost, am I going to pay full book value for your practice when, I know that it's probably not worth what you think it's going to be worth? I might sell it for, half book or 3/4 book. Whereas the CPA might be saying, oh, I could sell this for 2 or 3 times my book. I have 1,000 clients. Not necessarily, right? Have you taken a look at what the market value is? And when we partner with companies like CPA firms, we bring that to their attention, and we say, listen, if you don't have a legacy to transition this to, and you do believe that you're going to have to put this out to another buyer or a merger or something like that, have you taken book value into consideration? And if book value isn't what you think it is, well, how can we beef that up? Well, a way to beef that up is to create other consulting areas that the business does, right? As an example, maybe it moves into financial services a bit, right? Where there's reoccurring revenue that comes as a result of that. So it's all of these different, again, it's the look under the hood, Terry. It always is. It's that, to know where you're going, you have to know where you're at and what's preventing you from getting there.
Sure. What would you say, and I want to touch on that idea real quick, and then I'm going to ask you this question. So I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that can help raise or increase the value of a business is having a strategic plan. So if you have a strategic plan where you have multiple streams of income coming into the business, well, now you've increased the value of the business, because now it's not just the value of the book or the clients that you're buying. It's the value of the book of the clients that you're buying, and the value of this piece and the value of that piece and the value of that piece all together. So now this might be only worth half of what it actually is, or a quarter of what it actually is. But these other pieces that you've put in place add all of this value to help balance this piece out. So then you can actually get the value back out of the business that you've put into it.
Eloquently put, 100% right. Yep. Absolutely.
Totally. What would you say is maybe the biggest challenge right now for individuals or for business owners when it comes to planning out their financial future? What's their biggest challenge?
Well, I would say that the biggest challenge is that we're in a society now that is completely different than the society that we were even in a year ago. I mean, e-commerce now is so much more relevant than, even than it was a year ago, and it was incredibly relevant a year ago. But, brick and mortar businesses, client facing businesses, restauranting, things of that nature. I mean, they may never recover. It's a new world that we're operating in as a result of what has transpired here. And so I would say the biggest challenge is your business going to remain relevant in the new society that we're in? Is it going to remain relevant 5 years from now? Is it going to remain, or is it not adapting with the world that we're in? I mean, I look at my business as an example. My business was almost 100% client facing this time last year. Now, client facing is doing exactly what you and I are doing, Zoom meetings. Now, fortunately for me, I've been able to adapt in that space. But for other businesses that relied on that, they now have to find new innovative ways to stay relevant. That's, I think, probably the biggest challenge. That's where a partnership with somebody like you comes into play, right? I mean, one of the reasons I'm excited about doing work with you is because you're going to remind me how to continue to stay relevant in the economic time that we're in the society that we're in the space that I operate in, because things are getting more and more saturated. People are looking for, Tony Robbins says it best, if you're not constantly innovating, you could be creating revenue, but you're not creating expansion. And so current revenue means zero if that expansion is not going to be available 5 years down the road. So to me, it's how are you staying relevant? That's to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you're spot on across the board with all of this. This has been so incredibly timely, so incredibly relevant to everything going on. Speaking of relevancy, I think having these transparent conversations that so many financial planners are so afraid to have.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you don't have to be giving financial advice or representing a specific product or service. You're still helping to inform the public of what options even exist. And I think that helps you to stay relevant because you're finding ways to add value to the information they need to know. And as business owners, there are things we're just not thinking about. Everybody's in business for the things that they love. They know they can do. They know they can do them well. They love doing them. And for 90% of our community and our society, that is not in the world of finance. So we need to have our financial support network, our support system. And so I think you pointing out the trifecta, if you will, of the businesses that support each other to support you as an individual is a key thing. Those questions to ask to know what path to even walk down for yourself, for your future. Gosh, that's just a beautiful roadmap. And David, you've just been a wealth of knowledge today. I just want to thank you for sharing that and for opening that up to us.
It's been an absolute honor and a privilege, Terry. And and one last comment towards that point is, if you're a business or you're an individual, an individual family, and you're looking at a financial planner, also a good question to ask also of that financial planner is how are they staying relevant, and how are they, because the last thing you want to do is put your faith into a planner or into a team that's not going to be in existence 2-3 years down the road. Right. So are they partnering with dynamic marketing firms? Are they operating using, technology? Are they actively looking? Because in the world that we operate in, Terry, it's all about cost, right? We have to drive cost downward. The more that we drive down the cost, the better the client experience is going to be and better chance they have for success. Well, if we're driving our costs down, that means we have to magnify what we're doing. And the only way to magnify what we're doing is to put systems and processes in place to help to manage for that growth. So, that's a heck of a good point.
Absolutely. David, I know that the people listening today and watching this video are going to want to get in touch with you because you've just been an absolute wealth of knowledge and you are so on point with everything going on and things to look out for in the future that I know they're going to want to touch base with you. So what's going to be the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. So I'll give you my email address and then I'll also give my business cell phone number. So my email address, Terry, is DHARTER at epicwm.com. So it's dharter at epicwm.com. And my business cell phone is 914-806-5811. Anytime, any place. I'm thrilled to be a resource. Don't keep us a secret.
Awesome. That's fantastic. My dog just totally heard your dog's barking and she's now looking out the window.
The same thing.
She's like, I want it. Where is it? I'm going to go say hi. David, this has been an normal, That's right. Exactly. This has been an absolute joy. Those of you that have had the opportunity to meet him, to hear his story and to understand what options there are, because there are a lot of options available for you. You are not stuck. There's lots of places to go and move and shift and change that will give you the stability and the financial freedom and the resources that you're looking for your future. Get in touch with David. I know he's going to help guide you in the right direction. It's been an honor and a privilege, my friend. I look forward to seeing you soon.
I love you, my friend. The honor and privilege has been mine. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You are welcome. Till next time.